Spring 1940. In 6 weeks, Hitler knocks down Norway, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France. Britain is alone. The Luftwaffe warms up for Operation Sea Lion.
And here's the giant air armada Hitler hurls at England.
The invasion of the British Isles. And on the very day Europe cracks, May 10th, a bulldog walks into number 10. Winston Churchill, mocked as reckless, right when it mattered. His offer to the nation?
I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat.
No deals with Hitler, no illusions about mercy. As the army is cornered on French beaches, he gambles on a miracle called Dunkirk, 330,000 men snatched from defeat. As the sky turns black over London, he bets everything on the few, the RAF pilots who must stop the Luftwaffe or watch the channel fill with grey hulls. This is the story of how one gravel voice, a cigar, and an iron will blocked an invasion, and how Britain's darkest hour became its finest. Stay with me, because once you see what Churchill did between May and September 1940, you'll understand how Britain survived when every calculation said it wouldn't. On May 10th, 1940, the very day Germany invaded France and the Low Countries, Winston Churchill replaced Neville Chamberlain as Prime Minister. Churchill had warned about Hitler for years, condemning appeasement as naive and dangerous. Dismissed by many as unpredictable and controversial, he turned out to be the right man at the right time. Churchill's leadership, resolve, and oratory rallied the nation as Nazi flags rose over Paris and Western Europe buckled. Britain would not negotiate submission. It would fight. Immediately, Churchill formed a broad coalition government, Conservatives, Labour, and Liberals, uniting the country in a time of mortal danger. He also became Minister of Defence, taking direct control of strategy and coordination. The first crisis was already unfolding in France. The British Expeditionary Force and Allied troops were being forced back to the sea by the German advance. Churchill authorized Operation Dynamo, a desperate evacuation from the beaches of Dunkirk. Between May 26th and June 4th, 1940, over 330,000 Allied soldiers were rescued in what he later called a miracle of deliverance. Much equipment was abandoned, but the core of Britain's army survived to fight another day. After France surrendered, some voices within government urged exploring terms with Hitler. Churchill refused. He believed any deal would be a trap, trading temporary quiet for long servitude. In one of his most defiant speeches, he promised,
We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets.
Britain prepared for invasion. The coastline was fortified. The Home Guard, citizen volunteers, was armed and trained. Food and fuel were rationed for a long war. Churchill visited bombed neighborhoods, speaking directly to ordinary people under the falling bombs, raising morale by presence more than words. Then came the Battle of Britain, summer into autumn 1940. Outnumbered, the Royal Air Force held the line, denying Germany the air superiority needed to invade. Churchill immortalized the fighter and bomber crews with a single sentence. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Operation Sea Lion was shelved. Britain had endured. With France occupied, Churchill authorized limited raids and sabotage through the Special Operations Executive, set Europe ablaze, and British commandos struck at the edges of German control. But Britain needed allies and material to carry on a long war. When the invasion stalled in the Channel, Hitler tried to break Britain from the air. Night after night, the sirens wailed. London burned. Other cities followed: Liverpool, Manchester, Glasgow, Plymouth, Portsmouth, Bristol. On a single night in November, Coventry was hammered into a wreck of stone and sparks. The Blitz had a purpose: terrorize civilians, smash industry, force Churchill to bargain. He would not. Britain adapted to a new kind of front line: the doorstep. Families learned the drill by heart: blackout, shelter, silence. Underground stations became cities of the night: blankets on platforms, thermos flasks, children sleeping to the rattle of distant guns. ARP wardens patrolled darkened streets. Fire watchers climbed rooftops with buckets and sand. Ambulances threaded alleys glowing with embers. In the morning, People swept glass, chalked bus service as usual on shattered stops, and went to work. Churchill understood that presence is policy. He walked the ruins, hat pulled low, cigar lit, listening more than speaking. He let London see him in the same smoke they were breathing. In broadcast after broadcast, he offered no sugar, only steel, explaining what had been lost, what must be done next, and why surrender would only lengthen the darkness. Resolve became ritual. The RAF's night fighters, groping through searchlight cones, grew deadlier. Gun crews learned the timings. Barrage balloons nudged bombers higher. Chain-home radar and the observer corps stitched together a crude but effective warning net. Production dispersed, not destroyed. Machine tools moved out of blast zones. Factories split into smaller sheds. Output rerouted. The Luftwaffe could break buildings. It struggled to break systems. The Home Guard matured from jokes about broomsticks into a layered defense. Roadblocks, pillboxes, stop lines across the countryside. If the enemy crossed the beaches, they would find a nation-turned obstacle. In the docks, women drove cranes and men hauled hoses through burning rain. In newspapers and newsreels, the message hardened into a promise. We can take it. Bombing did damage, terrible visible damage. It also clarified the stakes. Each raid made peace feel less like safety and more like submission. The longer the bombers came, the more the country recognized that time, if it could be bought, favored Britain. The Royal Navy still ruled the seas. The Empire still shipped food and fuel. Across the Atlantic, an ally in waiting listened. By the spring of 1941, the Blitz had failed to force capitulation. The island still stood, scarred, sleepless, but unbent. Churchill turned to the next move. Convert sympathy into supply. The name would be simple, the impact enormous. Lend-Lease. In March 1941, Churchill championed the Lend-Lease Act, by which the United States supplied Britain with weapons, ships, aircraft, and food without immediate payment. He called it the most unsordid act in any nation's history. In June, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, invading the Soviet Union. Churchill, no friend of communism, announced immediate British support for the USSR with characteristic bite. If Hitler invaded hell, I would at least make a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons. The Grand Alliance, Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, was forming. After Pearl Harbor in December 1941, it solidified. Churchill focused on the periphery first. In North Africa, British and Commonwealth forces fought the Axis for the Suez Canal and Middle Eastern oil, the lifelines of empire. Victory there in 1943 opened the Mediterranean. Churchill then pressed the soft underbelly strategy, Sicily, July 1943, and the invasion of mainland Italy, September 1943, hoping to knock Italy out and draw German divisions south. Italy surrendered, but fighting the Germans up the peninsula proved grueling and slow. At the Tehran Conference in November-December 1943, Churchill met Roosevelt and Stalin. Under pressure from both, he agreed that the main Allied blow, Operation Overlord, a cross-channel invasion of German-occupied France, would take place in the spring of 1944. Churchill had reservations about timing and casualties, but he recognized the necessity. The Red Army needed relief, and the Western Allies needed a decisive front in France. In the months before D-Day, Churchill supported vast deception operations, Operation Bodyguard, to mislead German intelligence about the invasion's timing and location. Across southern England, harbors filled with landing craft, airfields swelled with transports, and fields bristled with decoy tanks and fake armies. Diplomacy, logistics, and secrecy moved in lockstep. On June 6, 1944, the Allies stormed ashore in Normandy. Churchill, restless and eager, even tried to visit the beachhead in the first days, but King George VI and his advisors insisted he remain in Britain. As the Allies broke out of Normandy and liberated Paris in August, Churchill worked to keep British interests central within an alliance increasingly dominated by American manpower and Soviet momentum. In September 1944, Churchill backed Operation Market Garden, Field Marshal Montgomery's bold attempt to leap the Rhine through the Netherlands. It failed to secure a bridge too far at Arnhem, costing time and lives. Churchill publicly supported his commanders, but privately reckoned with the price of audacity. Then, in December 1944, Hitler launched his last major offensive, the Battle of the Bulge. The surprise in the Ardennes fell heavily on American forces. Britain's 21st Army Group, under Montgomery, stabilized the northern shoulder while the US absorbed and reversed the blow. Churchill later praised American endurance, while noting Britain had done its duty in one of the war's final bitter struggles. By early 1945, Allied victory in Europe was in sight, and the shape of the peace loomed. At Yalta in February, Churchill negotiated with Roosevelt and Stalin over the United Nations, Poland, and spheres of influence. He feared Soviet domination in Eastern Europe, but had limited leverage as the Red Army occupied the ground. Hitler's death in April was followed by Germany's surrender in early May 1945. Britain celebrated VE Day. Churchill, cigar aloft, was the very image of wartime defiance fulfilled. Yet politics turned swiftly. In July, the first general election in a decade delivered a landslide for Clement Attlee's Labour Party, promising social reform and reconstruction. Churchill was stunned, gracious in defeat, and stepped down as Prime Minister, though he remained a towering figure in opposition.
The build-up of pro-communist Germany in their areas, this will cause new serious difficulties in the American and British zones and will give the defeated Germans the power of putting themselves up to auction.
In March 1946, at Fulton, Missouri, he warned the world that an Iron Curtain had descended across Europe, an early, accurate reading of the coming Cold War. In 1951, he returned to Downing Street for a final term, more elder statesman than warlord. Winston Churchill's leadership in the Second World War remains one of Britain's defining chapters. He rallied a lonely nation with honesty and steel, matched rhetoric to strategy, built coalitions at home and abroad, and helped steer the Allies to victory over Nazi tyranny. He was imperfect, controversial, human, yet in the darkest hour, he was unyielding. His voice, and the resolve behind it, helped save a free Europe and shape the world that followed. Britain didn't win by luck. It won by will. If this story earned your time, tap like. It tells the algorithm to show real history to more people. Subscribe for next week's chapter and tell me in the comments, where should we go next?